Hello and welcome to the 61st airing of the Photoshop Show. I'm Ron Clifford. I'm kind of taking a little bit of the host seat tonight, and Jan Kabili is going to be the co-host. I guess we're both co-hosts in a sense. Right, Jan?
That's right.
Yeah, and tonight we have a really special guest who's actually rushing on her way home to be here. She should be joining us within about 5 minutes. Julia Kuzmenko, who is a phenomenal skin retouch artist, fashion photographer, as I understand, formerly a model herself, and she teaches all over the world. And I can't recommend anybody more highly if you're interested in doing high-end portrait retouching. Her work, there's no equal, really. Well, maybe Michael's pretty close, but anyway. So I want to welcome you to that. We also have a kind of a guest panelist tonight, Hilmar Smith, and Hilmar and I have known each other. Not really well, but we got to know each other on the Google Plus network, and she's a phenomenal photographer as well. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute, Hilmar, but welcome.
Thank you.
And of course we have Dave Bell. Dave, our trusty panelist and producer and person who saves my butt all the time when the technology doesn't work.
Always great to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Dave. So, Jan, what have you been up to recently?
What have I? Oh, well, I'm back in the lynda.com studio.
Oh wow! You just don't stop. That's
yeah.
So we'll recap. You just released the book, and you're about to do a Lightroom course at the Anderson Ranch.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I need to prepare that, don't I?
And you're diving back into another lynda.com, and you're starting your Arcanum cohort.
Yes, that's right. And somewhere I'm supposed to sleep. When I forgot that.
That's amazing. That's just unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah, but it's all fun. I mean, it's not anything that I would say no to. Every one of those things is like a dream come true, right? So where do you start? So you just have to go until the schedule's full, and then it's full. That's it, right? Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I really don't. I know that I do the Arcanum stuff, and I had some mentorship going concurrently. I'm not starting some more private ones up recently, but I had that going and a couple of mentorships going, and then my G+, and then I had work to do, and then I had a trip, and I needed a month off just to recover. So yeah, that's amazing that you're able to stay so productive.
Well, you've been working really hard on the Arcanum, I know. That's very admirable. You've come up with a lot of great ideas, ways to do things. You're the best mentor, so I'm always peeking into your cohort.
Well, I really enjoy it. We've been having a ball. Dave's in my cohort. We've been having a ball this first, it's off of beta now, but during the beta testing we were figuring things out and making mistakes along the way and having a great time, and the cohort, the apprentices and myself have really gelled. In fact, we made history on Sunday. We had our first live cohort photo walk in Toronto, and 6 of us, and this was 5 from my own cohort and myself, spent the afternoon in Toronto, and that was just fantastic.
So there are lots of people who live in Toronto who are active on G+ and in the Arcanum, is that right?
Yes, quite. So we often have photo walks with over 30 people here, easily, and up to 50.
Well, why? What is it about Toronto, do you think?
It's cold and people have to spend time playing on their computers. No, I don't know. There's a lot of really creative and talented people here, not just in Toronto, but in the area. And Toronto has a huge metro area. It reaches a much bigger area than just the 4 million or so people, kind of concentrated. It reaches, within 40 minutes of itself, it reaches so many more people. So there's a very high population concentration.
I know. You know I grew up in Buffalo, right? It's an hour from you.
Yeah. See, you're practically a Torontonian.
I'm a Buffalo chip. Yeah. What about you, Helen? Where are you?
Me? I'm down in Charlotte, North Carolina. I just moved here like a month ago. Before I was in Orlando. I love Orlando. I miss Florida like crazy.
Well, why did you move?
Love.
Oh, love. That's a good reason.
Yeah, well, my boyfriend started working here in January, so we decided that we needed to move.
Well, I've heard it's very pretty there.
It is pretty. I haven't been able to go anywhere. I have been in bed for 3 months.
Yes, but it's worth it. Do you want to tell people why?
Sorry?
You want to say why?
Well, I'm having a baby. I probably have it tonight. I'm like 2 years pregnant already.
This could be like the first ever G Plus Hangout birth taking place live on the show.
That would be funny. That would be really funny.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up, and it's kind of good that Julie's a little late, because I wanted to talk to you, Hilmar, a little bit about some fantastic news that came out last month, and well-deserved, by the way. Our friend Scott Kelby featured you on his blog.
Yeah, that was
What happened with that? Like, you woke up one day and suddenly there's an email. What happened?
I have always been a humongous fan of Scott and everybody there at Kelby. Just out of nowhere, I just opened my emails and I see this email asking me if I wanted to be featured on his blog, and I was like, me? Seriously? I had to double check to see if he wasn't anybody that was messing with me.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, because I have been shooting just for 3 years. I remember the first thing that I did when I started shooting, and because I wanted just to jump in and be amazing. I started just watching classes with the Kelby people, and I just dreamed one day just to be able to be a little bit close to whatever they were doing. So getting that email for me was just fantastic. I remember that I posted something on Facebook and you were asking me like crazy what happened, and I couldn't tell, but yeah, it's still great. Like just to be able to be noticed, from somebody like Scott is just awesome.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, as someone who's watched your growth over the last 3 years, it's been nothing short of amazing, and I know that it wasn't magic, that you worked very hard to improve your skills and to begin to find a voice with your photography in theme shoots in fashion photography. And one of the reasons I thought you would be great as a panelist is because I know that you follow Julia's work as well and have learned a great deal from her too.
Yes, I'm a humongous fan of her work. Her skin work is fantastic. Like I have her books and I look at every single retouching tutorial that she has, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and speaking of, hi Julia, how are you? We're glad you could make it. We were just talking about you while you weren't here.
Well, I hope it was all good, even though I wasn't here because I messed it up. I'm so sorry, honest mistake. I was not even doing anything. I just went for a run.
It's okay. One of the things that I notice about planning Google Plus events is the notifications don't always display the right time. And so it was very likely just a mess up in the notification. And you're here, and I'm really happy because, well, we've been trying to plan this for over a year. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
A long time. Yeah, and so now finally you're going to be able to join us and talk to us about retouching in fashion and about your the work you do in your career. And so it's kind of moving right into it because we didn't get a little bit of a pre-show, but tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about how you moved into retouching. How did all this happen? Now, I mean, you have Retouching Academy and you write for Fstoppers and you're still doing photography. What led into retouching?
It's funny enough. It wasn't even I wasn't even going to. I always loved Photoshop, and I always loved just messing around. I used to paint when I was a child, and all of that, it kind of translates into when you have a different media, but it's still drawing and painting. But I got married, and my husband was in the Air Force. He used to be in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Omaha, and there was a big base, and Omaha is a tiny little town in the Midwest in the States, and nobody cares about beauty photography whatsoever. So I just found myself, I went to Australia for a couple of years to study photography, and then I find myself in Omaha where nobody wants to pay or hire me at all for beauty photography or anything that I was doing before. I was shooting for musicians in Australia. My work was plastered all over the city on like big, you know, posters and this and that and CD covers and iTunes artwork and all of that, and I was going somewhere with that, and then I end up in Omaha and there is nothing I can do, and so I just started looking into, you know, what I wanted to make money. I wanted to be, you know, an artist, but not a starving artist. I'm married, okay, but you know, you always want to prove something to yourself, and you know, I didn't quit my life in Moscow and went to Australia to, you know, learn this craft for nothing. I didn't want it to end like that. Because I had those feelings and thoughts that maybe I should just go and get a job, you know, and go back where I came from. And that whole photography, few years of living a dream, working with models, creative professionals, that all was like just a dream. And then I started posting just advertising on Craigslist that I do retouching. And so my first few jobs, retouching jobs, were really a big failure because I didn't get paid and I was sending out files right away, so I would retouch them. And now that I look at them, I still have them somewhere. They're horrible because there's a huge difference between retouching for yourself and retouching for someone else.
Yeah.
So when you're retouching for yourself, mainly you're just focusing on creating this picture that is in your mind. You think that this is going to look pretty for everyone else. When you're retouching for someone, they don't want your, you know, your interpretation of pretty colors, you know, and that's like usually in the first couple of years that's what a lot of photographers do. They just finish up the retouching and just slap a color corrections with like purplish hues in the shadows and something like that. That the artistic styling that makes no sense whatsoever, and that's what I do. You know, that's my view of beautiful art. That's clients don't want us to do, retouchers to do that. So my first few experiences were horrible, and then slowly I continued working on my own work, on my own photography, and that all kind of went, you know, hand in hand with me finding a studio in Omaha and starting to shoot actually and retouch my own work. And I had a big gap between my last photo shoot in the studio in Melbourne in 2010, actually at the end of 2009, and then until 2012 I did not have any, well, maybe one or two client shoots in the studio. So I was really, really rusty, and I was trying to catch up with my, you know, photography and retouching all that, basically just fixing all that because it was really badly shot. But every once in a while, you know, I would get a good picture. Some of them are actually still in my portfolio from that time. But retouching and fixing a lot of problems that I shot back then was a really good, you know, so doing those small retouching jobs for people I don't know, and they're not, you know, just someone who does local photography, you know, business or whatever. So retouching that, kind of getting better every time because different demands, different tasks, completely different photography, and getting more into clean colors and correct colors rather than crazy artistic colors that I was allowed to do with my own photography. So understanding that a little bit better, and then a lot of times, you know, kind of sort of what you think bad thing is happening to you. You know, you're an artist and you find yourself somewhere where nobody needs your art. So that was a bad thing. I was desperate and I was really upset, and I was just sometimes even crying because, you know, it was just so disheartening. I spent so much time and tried to do something, and then I get married, so I can't just, you know, take off and leave Omaha because I want to be an artist. I just got married, so I have to stay. Yeah. So yeah, but then, you know, finding more and more clients, and then I got lucky and someone saw my work on Facebook. They approached me, and then one better client after the other. I stopped taking on the jobs that were leading nowhere, and then I got very lucky. The hairstylist and makeup artist that I was working with in Omaha, we shot every month, a few times a month, a lot of my work from that period, 2012, and the beginning of 2013, is done with her, with that same one person, and she was working for a big hairstyling company, and she had a lot of hairstylists on her Facebook, so she was sharing my work, and so those people saw my work, they approached me, and then one celebrity hairstylist emailed me and said that she loved my retouching and my work, and she wanted to see if I could, retouch her images. And we started working, and it was in the beginning of 2012 as well. So everything, my photography, again, kind of started gaining, that momentum, and I started shooting.
I'll just kind of break in there for a second, because
Sure.
as we were just talking, actually, Hilmar and the group here were talking about how Facebook, and I was going to mention this because you were saying you're in Omaha and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and that's not really the hub of industry for fashion, but you're talking about something that that Facebook is actually a conduit to business for a lot of people, and you run Retouching Academy, which is a community there on Facebook that is really very popular and becoming more popular every day. And so, is that something that really kind of brought you into like a more international world by working through social media?
Yeah, I didn't understand that at the beginning, but luckily I got into it as soon as I moved to the States. I actually created a page to start with, just my Julia Kuzmenko visual artist page, and it was at first, whenever you start something like that, there are no people, nobody, so you're talking to no one, and you post stuff, and it seems like, oh, why am I doing this? And then there are 10 people, and then there is 100 of people, and there is more and more and more. Now it's up to 70,000, and it's not even that much anymore. It's not that many people anymore. And but definitely, so many good things came my way because of Facebook. And yeah, Facebook is the strongest for me. I know that, of course, Google Plus is gaining a lot. It's been gaining that.
And what our conversation was is they both seem to be a little bit different. And if you're very client-based, Facebook seems to be a really great platform for business. And if you're an educator like Jan is and I am, then, well, you are too. But Google Plus has been a fantastic platform for me, and because I'm involved in education for photographers, and there are millions of photographers on Google Plus. And so I think it's just a matter of finding that niche, and then being patient and continuing.
Building it up.
Now, I don't want to go take too long until I ask if you have a demonstration and want to talk about some specific things. I know some very popular things on people's minds are the idea, because, and you see this in your own community, is people love the concept of frequency separation, retouching on skin, and dodge and burning. I mean, those are two fundamental items. But recently, you had a little bit of an issue with that, I think.
Yeah.
What's happened? What is the issue, and what are some of the ways to get around that? So I think I'll let you talk about that first issue before I ask you to demonstrate. Is that people just they don't understand the concept, or what's the issue? I
think the more I teach and the more I actually see the work of my students, before, when I was just, there was an ebook, it gets purchased and it goes away. I never see what they actually create.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it leads, what my teaching does for the actual students. When I started doing workshops and getting more into actually look at what we shot on the first day, for example, we shoot. The second day we select and retouch images, and then I usually create a group, and then my group that I ran a real physical workshop with, then I see their work and they upload what they've retouched, and I started seeing not what I explained. It's not what I explained. And then the more I started kind of digging into the problem, what the actual problem is, the more I started to understand that techniques mean very little. It's not the knowledge of the technique, because the technique is, I've written the really, step-by-step guides on Fstoppers for dodging and burning and the frequency separation technique. Have we seen any improvement in the overall use of those? No, we haven't, because reading the technique and starting to implement it doesn't really do anything for you, no matter how well I explain. The problem is in the head, in the vision of the person who's actually applying the technique. So I would say a lot of people pick up the camera, they become a photographer. They become a professional photographer because they just registered a DBA and they started getting clients, so they're now a professional photographer. I wish it was, I know that a lot of people wouldn't agree, but I wish it was a little bit different, and I wish photography was just like any other serious profession. You have to go to college, you have to, or at least some sort of formal education before you can call yourself a professional. I wish that was the case. You know, I know I've had already arguments even with a few of Fstoppers, big people, you know, because they don't believe in formal education. I do believe in formal education. I went through 2 years of college for photography.
Yeah,
I'm not even talking
I'll just kind of speak on that too, because if you're gonna become professional, if you're really gonna get there, you're gonna invest in that education no matter what. It's better to invest in it before than later. I invested in I didn't do a full degree, but I invested in my own education. I apprenticed or interned with other photographers. I was an assistant and a second shooter, and I mean, you go through these things. You don't just pick up a camera and become a professional. And so you certainly won't get an argument from me, but the way I look at it is your work is going to speak for itself, and you're not going to get there until you've invested in yourself somehow. Whether it's a formal education or whether it's through interning or just whether it's a school of hard knocks.
You know, I have a question, which is, I wonder if, I think we're assuming too much that just by going to school, somehow you're going to gain the vision that I think you're really talking about, Julie, you know, where it's not about technique, it's not about how to handle the camera, it's being able to see in a certain way. And that's, I think that's the difference between an artist and a technician almost.
Yes.
So my question to you is, have you figured out any ways that you can help people to get the vision piece of it?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. I think I went back and I kind of imagined what changed my vision, what made me see what looks good, what looks bad. And funny enough, it was the fact that our teachers, almost in every lesson, they would start with visual appreciation, and they would show us the images of the big photographers of all times and the paintings, and explain what looks good, what doesn't. Not the current photographers, not our peers, not the fashion photographers of today, but actually what is definitely considered, you know, our classics, say, right? And not just that, sculptures. You know, we went through the history of visual arts, through the history of arts in general. We started from zero. We went through all of it, and a lot of pictures were popping up again and again and again, from class to class, from, you know, one day, next week, the following month, and then you start recognizing, you see it all the time in front of your eyes, perfect composition, the colors, the, you know, everything, visual balance, plus the theory that we were taught, you know, we went through lines, visual balance, negative space, this, that. Sometimes I wouldn't even be able to remember what exactly we learned, but it's my second nature now. And that's the plus of formal education, when you are exposed to something over and over and over again, and then you make the right choices when you need to. You probably, it's in your subconscious mind already, because it's so deep already, because you've seen it so many times. And then, you know, that's all you need to do. You need to be exposed. You need to see. You need to look at great art, not necessarily pictures on 500 pixels right now, right? The one of the websites that is very popular. Get a Pinterest. Start painting. You know, paintings. You know, portraits. Anything that is correctly well balanced, correctly photographed or painted. You know, learn all that, values, colors, all of that, it all goes into it. It's not like you go and pick up a camera and then you're like, okay, well, everyone retouches their images. Now I have to start retouching too. And then you buy Photoshop or download Photoshop, and then, you know, you learn dodging and burning, and there you are. You're a professional photographer and you're retouching. No, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. And with going back to the frequency separation, the reason why I actually said that on, I think you're referring to the post where I said I should probably ban the frequency vibration from my
from the, yeah, you did a little stir. Everyone's going, no, you can't ban frequent.
Yeah, I think what I really, and I didn't even understand when I said that, to the point that I understood after I read all the comments. I think what really needs to be done is it should be taught to someone who is already understanding, who has that vision. When they look at the picture and they understand, okay, I need to remove this, but not to the point that I completely remove highlights and shadows, just even everything out so that the values are completely, so you're looking at a flat form, but understand where you can, if you're misplacing or replacing a highlight, then you need to understand how you're reshaping the form.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head. And as an artist, like my training is first in art and then in photography, so it didn't really occur to me that would be happening, and it really struck home when you said that in the post, when you mentioned that in Retouching Academy, that it's true that there are so many photographers that lack the artistic sensibility to use the tools that we have, and it's not their fault. It's that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they don't have the education to use the tools to their best advantage.
Yeah, but so then it becomes, how do you help people with that? And I heard you say two important things. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. That one thing people can do, obviously, is to look to the classics, to look to the masters, to look to what happened before, when it wasn't modern photography and digital everything and fashion. That's one thing. And the other thing is to look outside of photography for inspiration, at the other arts, and even things that aren't art. You know, look at magazines and look at advertisements there and see how things are placed. And that's something that I think maybe people haven't thought of. So that's two pieces of good advice. You don't have to necessarily go to a graduate program to do those things.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the, I can't recommend everyone to go, in order for them to use their retouching techniques and tools better than they are doing right now. I can't tell them you need to go to school, but what I can say is make sure that you spend a certain amount of time daily, hopefully daily, looking at good work. At, again, paintings, drawings. I will show you something. I've been getting more and more, this type of books. And I don't have it in this room, but I've got another book that I just received. It's classical painting atelier or something like that, something about painting. And someone commented on my Instagram when I posted the picture of the cover of the book. They said, "Are you going to paint oils?" No, I'm not going to paint anything. I'm just going to learn, what I'm lacking. And I still think that, there is never a stop to someone. Maybe when I'm 50, 60, 70, I will probably be a master. But until then, I still have thousands and thousands of pictures to retouch. But there is never ever a stop to learning something. And the better I understand values and colors, the better I will be.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I think about the photography of, was Bill Gekas, is it? He reproduces classical paintings in real photographs by manipulating the light, and he's a fantastic guy to look at that understands how light sculpts form. Mm-hmm. But just before, I really wanted to have you share with us a little bit of technique. Of course, I wanted to touch base on the idea that the technique isn't enough on its own, that we need to be looking at understanding form and how light falls on, especially on the human face, but on all form. Mm-hmm. But before I did, I kind of wanted to just steer back a bit and kind of formally introduce you to Hilmar. Gilmar Smith, I've known her for 3 years, but she has really been, I don't know, her creativity has exploded in the last couple of years. She's just, we were talking just as you came in about her feature on Scott Kelby's blog about her recent work, and she is a member of the Retouching Academy, and I think she can really relate to your own journey in that she's going through that herself. Did you want to add anything to that, Hilmar?
I just love just listening to you, the way the whole story goes about, when you were in Omaha and how you came back to photography, because that's kind of, I feel myself right now. I only have been shooting for 3 years. I'm learning every day. I'm part of the Retouching Academy, but I'm one of those students that sit in the back I just absorb. You never see me like really posting anything or commenting on anything. I just watch and try to learn and absorb as much as I want. And I'm a huge fan. I just love your work.
Thank you.
And she should be posting. She could really be making an impact there. Her work is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we've got this now. We've got our, put on this iron gloves, and now we're like letting only good things through, so that only that kind of goes back to what I was just saying, that you need to be exposed. You need to be visual. The imagery that we are seeing, it needs to be good. And when someone complained, when I was in Australia, I wasn't spending much time, and I didn't even know what was going on in the group. And so when I got back, I realized that there were complaints about how too much really bad work was flooding the wall. And even though I tried to kind of calm down the whole, complaining part, the negativity in the group, but I was on their side. I agree, because that's exactly what I always say. We shouldn't be looking at really bad. In fact, I had this weird, and I've always had this. It's funny. I've always thought, if I see a bad picture on Facebook or whatever, I always try to close it out just as soon as possible. I feel like my vision will be contaminated or something. It's like contagious. I don't want to see anything, bad imagery, bad retouching. I don't want to see that. As if it's stuck, it will get stuck in my head, and then I will, not recreate that. I don't want to see anything bad. I only want to see great work. So we're trying to,
I think it was a fantastic move, just to,
It's good for everyone. I think it's good for the majority of.
It is good for everyone, and then people get to know what the expectation is. They know when they're actually getting to that point where they're good. My own background, just before I get you, are you familiar with the screen share feature of Google+?
I've done that before. I am looking at the screen now and thinking it's been a long time, and I don't even know where to click.
I can walk you through it, no problem. I just wanted to say that one of my previous careers, I was a photo retoucher. I worked for studios, but it wasn't with Photoshop. It was with airbrushes and pencils and dyes and negatives and prints and sprays, and it was horrible. I'm surprised I'm still alive. But it's funny though, the more I do retouching in Photoshop, the more I realize it's very, very much the same. I mean, building masks and using the different techniques and getting to know your Photoshop tools. I use them extensively in fine art landscape work a lot, but I didn't realize how much it all applies to portrait retouching. And you don't even have as big a set of tools in portrait retouching to do a great job. You really only need to know a lot about a little. Like, you need to know what you know about a certain set of tools. Anyway, I'm going to walk you through that screen share if I could. If you've got something you can
Sure. I will. Let me just. I'll open one of the. Do you want me to select an image to look at together?
Sure. Yeah, that would be great.
All right. Yeah. So tell me how I get.
So if you hover over, if you have your Photoshop open in the back or whatever, if you hover over our window,
Okay.
and on the left-hand side there's like a green monitor with a white arrow. Just just click that, and choose to share full screen or desktop.
Okay. I'll probably do screen.
Yeah.
Because
Don't
jump into different.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't share just the application, because the Adobe toolbars won't show up. Make sure you share full screen, if that's what it says, and then switch to the application.
Okay. And you're seeing it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I'm just going to look at just a few pictures. Let me, I understand that a lot of people already know what just like I said, there are tutorials and there are video tutorials all over the place, and the guides and everything is already there. So to read the steps of any technique, it's all already there. It's all available.
Yeah,
so
I'm going to actually share if I can. I don't have the link right off, but maybe me or Dave can look on Fstoppers for that link on.
Oh yeah, I will send it to you.
I'm going to put it right here in the chat now, though. So maybe Dave or I'll just go looking for that. But you go ahead.
if you actually just do you want me to do it? I will.
Sure. Yeah.
Really quickly do Fstoppers, and it comes up right there. And then I need to get.
It's so much faster than I would have done it.
It's in my now now I need to find the window where you guys are. This one? No. This. So here we go. Now this is it. And then the chat would be where?
Right above the screen share button, and then if you share that link, I'll share it into the event.
Okay, this is the chat, and these are all my articles.
Yeah.
Oh, is that login as Retouching Academy? Wonderful. Yes, I guess.
Oh, it says fstoppers.com, so it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm under Retouching Academy. I'm logged in Google Plus, but
okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back. So basically, the stops and how to set up layers and everything, it's already out there, and everyone probably already knows how it's done. But what I want to show is the difference, because I see so many, well, works of beginners and my students, and I see where the mistakes come from. I will show just a couple of things, and I will actually talk about the mistakes, the common mistakes.
That would be great, because that's an area that really needs to be addressed for people to understand how to do this. Is it possible to open your Photoshop full screen?
This is Steel Bridge. I'm just trying to find a picture that has some problems to correct. She's got such a wonderful skin. There is not really much to correct, so she's my favorite model. Okay, it's opening now. And I will just, normally before I open any image in Photoshop, I will actually get probably a couple of different variations. If there is anything to correct, exposure-wise or color-wise, I would normally just get a couple of versions of the picture with different exposure settings, and then combine them in PSD, my final PSD that I will be working with. And it's a little bit on the slower side. I was actually planning to talk about skin colors a little bit, so I have the presentation open there, but we'll see how we go with the time. And with I'm going to masterize this. I never work on the background layer, so I always have that reference point that I can go back to. This is a little bit yellow. Yeah, I wasn't paying too much attention, so let's not pay attention to the colors as much as difference that we want to fix. So with the frequency separation, normally before I get there, I would definitely color correct the picture, the overall look of the picture. Here I see a lot of reds, and there is a lot of yellows in here, and I would use my favorite color correction tools are selective color and just the curves, or hue and saturation. If I have like a local little problem that I really want to address before I even start working with the frequency separation, I could just take a little bit. I'm looking at this area where I see that there is a lot of yellows, and I won't do it fully. I just want to show you the logic behind this whole thing. Okay, so I was seeing a lot of yellows in this part, only in this part of the face, and I would take the yellows out and then we'll mask everything, and just with a white soft brush on lower opacity, I will just unmask the areas. And I don't have to make a selection here really, because I'm only affecting the reds, so the background is in red, so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna change anything there. So we'll just take those yellows out a little bit, trying not to get onto the lipstick, because the lipstick I should keep the color as is. And I will take anything that looks a little bit yellowish to me. And see, this is something that it's difficult to explain. I do have good class on it, and I do have a good approach that I teach my students about how you can measure it. If you can't still see where there is a little bit too much yellow, or where there is a little bit too much magenta, I do have a good kind of structure how you can measure it through the info panel, and you can read CMYK percentage to be able to tell when you need to add or subtract yellows or cyans and all of that. But again, because we want to focus on the frequency separation, I will just kind of just, because I'm seeing those yellows already. That's something you develop with your vision. That's something you retouch so many times, and you look at so many great images that were retouched, and the skin color is amazing in the final image. And so over time, your eyes are so trained that you don't need any measurements. You don't need.
That's one thing I've been finding is that, I mean, you say, oh, this was too yellow or this is too magenta, and I have a strong suspicion a lot of people who are getting started in skin retouching, they're not yet trained to quite see that. They're not sure, like, I don't get it. Like, they're expecting to see really strong overtones, but often it's quite subtle. And the thing about skin, especially Caucasian skin, is it contains a lot of different colors. There's green, and there's blue, and there's violet, and there's magenta, and there's yellow. And so it does take some time to begin to see the casts in skin.
Yes, and in order to start seeing it, you need to be, actively seeking to learn to see it. So it doesn't just dawn on an artist just one morning. You wake up and you start seeing it. You have to train your eye. You have to look at great images and try to find those inconsistencies in colors. And when the Caucasian skin can be easily taken a little bit into orangey, yellowish color, which is incorrect, or it can be pinky. Like right now, her blush is pinkish, which is not that bad. It's okay. But when this part is also very pink, that's when it starts to become a little bit of a problem. And so, again, if I was just quickly to fix that, I would add another layer with the reds and just take magentas out a little bit. And, and just watch for the colors to get a little bit, brighter, and maybe. And, again, your color theory knowledge comes into play here as well. So if you want to take the reds out, you can do it in a few different ways, right? If you want to, you can go into the curves and affect, magentas there, or you can go into the hue and saturation and the gradients, and there are so many in select color. There are so many ways where you can actually, apply those changes and get to the same result. And that's the knowledge of the program, and again, the vision and the knowledge of the color theory. So again, I'm not going to go too far with this, but you can see that really strong. I hope that Google Hangouts actually allow us to.
Yeah, they have improved. There is I'm seeing a pretty high resolution, good color image. So obviously it will depend on your own monitor, but you will be able to see the difference in those areas that you were brushing with your masks.
Can you see that strong yellow cast going away?
Going on and off, especially in the shadow of the cheeks. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's how I usually approach that. And then of course I would spend a little bit more time, later on, evening out little things. But I'm just going to jump into frequency separation.
Yeah. And when you jump, I'm sure you're going to cover this anyway, but go ahead and jump into that. I was just I'm curious, and I know your opinion on that is that you use the spot healing brush before you start generally as a kind of a first step before you start your frequency separation. And there are different schools on that. Some people are very opposed, saying, oh no, you should never use the healing brush tool. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you mean like healing brush when you already set up the frequency separation, or
no, just before, like as a first, your first step before you open frequency separation?
Yeah, I actually love the healing brush, and no matter what people say, I will always use it, because with the clone stamp tool, you probably need a lot more, practice and knowledge before you actually start sampling from the correct colors, right? So if of course I would work with a lot lower opacity, but then I'm always risking, if I sample from somewhere here, and I try to, maybe this must be card down below, and I try to cover this up, I'm gonna exaggerate the effect, just to show that this is what the clone stamp tool does, because it just copies pixels from one spot to another. So I have to first of all sample from the correct area, and then I have to match the texture and all of that. With the healing brush tool, it's just as simple as this. You just sample and cover. that's it. It's gone. It matches the texture, but it kind of does what the frequency separation does. And all the small things that we can see here, all the contrasty. I usually go for the contrasty little spots and dots that it doesn't make really a lot of sense to leave them until you're ready to do the frequency separation or until you're, even doing the dodging and burning, because you can easily just take them out, and they're so small that, nobody is gonna ever find them or see them there. Something that's a little bit larger, I could leave it until I'm in the frequency separation or until I'm dodging and burning. And because I started with the frequency separation a long time ago, I've kind of mastered it to the point that a lot of things are easier for me to fix in the frequency separation because I change the radius that I select of the filters and the blur. I change it depending on the area I'm working on, and I always find the correct. I may not nail it from the first time, so I may make a choice of the pixel radius and then start brushing over an area that I'm fixing and then realize that it wasn't the correct one. I will just delete it and redo it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would definitely pick up a healing brush tool or the spot healing brush tool. I don't use it that often these days, but it's also a wonderful tool. With a tiny little spot healing brush, you can just go over and very quickly just remove all of those little spots and dots that are here, because it does the same thing. You just don't need to sample, so it's quicker. You just go boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I found that myself, and I found that with the proximity match, it doesn't lose skin texture as long as you're not doing large areas, as long as you remain small.
Yeah, always.
How's it different than, say, content-aware fill? I know the content-aware fill will take a lot longer for spots.
Yeah, I'm using them on such a small scale that I don't even think that any of that will really make a big difference. It may take longer as the process of it, but I think when you're using it on such a tiny little, tiny little dots, then really it doesn't. I always use proximity match, but I don't think it will matter because the size of the brush is so small that it won't really. I'm not sure though, because I'm using proximity match all the time. But when I get closer to the areas like this, when there is a lot of different colors and values meet, I wouldn't use the healing brush. That's where I would, if I'm somewhere close to the area with a completely different texture or color or values or saturation, I would definitely go ahead and pick up the clone stamp tool. But I'm not going to go over the entire face, so we save some time. So I'm still merging everything down for every step of my retouching. I'm trying to break away from that, but it's so instilled in my, it's my second nature. I'm trying to keep, layers, adjustment layers on top of it, but I'm still finding myself more comfortable when I merge. For example, in this layer, I've got my color corrections, and then slowing down, and then in the top layer, I've got my skin corrections. I always recommend naming them, but I honestly don't do it when I'm working at home because I can see what there is. And also one thing that I always try to remember is as soon as I started working on a file that I just pulled from a RAW, I should always do save as because if you lose something, or if you, okay, I'm going to just save it right here. If Photoshop crashes, all of that, it will recover whatever at some point where it stopped. But then you just don't want to accidentally lose your work if you're, if you're not saving in the proper location and as a proper name file and stuff like that. So I always try to make sure to save before I move on with everything else. This is a good, this is a good candidate, and this one too, for the healing brush. So I wouldn't leave this for anything else. If I'm lucky, if I can nail this texture, I would, even though I'm not very lucky today. But the healing brush tool can actually, will actually match the texture. If I go along this line, I can actually not smudge it. The clone stamp tool, of course, will do it, but if you can, if you master that, you can actually do a lot of, even along the lines with the healing brush, you can do a lot of good retouching. But it's more technical, this part. when your hand needs to know, or your eye needs to know exactly where to put your hand to.
And now, as you move into frequency separation, it separates things. When we talk, it sounds so scientific, frequency separation, but really what it's doing is separating some broader tonal changes from the texture.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's as simply put as it is.
Yes.
But frequency separation sounds so much better.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like that secret that pro retouchers keep from everyone else. But no, it's not. Of course, first of all, it's not a secret anymore. And second, the main thing when we, the way you described it, it's exactly what it is. And the main thing that we need to learn to do to master the technique is to tell Photoshop how much texture to take to that top level layer, and how much tones, how broad those undertones should be on the underlying layer. Yeah. That's all there is. That's the main thing that a lot of people are missing. And I actually didn't even realize that until maybe a year ago, maybe even, probably it was definitely after my first book came out, because then I was using just the same radius over and over again, and it seemed to work for me. I would just lower the opacity when I was just doing it, just going over. So basically, if you know where you're going, you can go there. You can get there using anything. But the best way to approach frequency separation is still to take the correct amount of texture onto the top layer, and then you can work depending on what your task is. Because even on one face, I could use one set of frequency separation on this area, and then I can go and use a completely different set with a completely different radius on the different area, and I will run the frequency separation set as many times as I need until I, clean up all the problems that I've got. And actually, I want to say that one thing that I kind of knew it, I just naturally felt it, but Connie, one of our team members in Retouching Academy, he's a photographer from Sweden, and he wrote an article about zooming out, the importance of zooming out as you retouch, and it's an article on Retouching Academy. This is so, so simple, and everyone understands it, and a lot of people just discount that and don't even go read it because they think, oh, well, who cares? Zooming in, zooming out. Of course, we all do that as we retouch. But he actually points out at what we call texture and what we think is an undertone is not exactly that. Because when you even out those larger, like the middle texture, middle frequencies, I would say, I'm not sure how it's called. So there is high, there is low, and
middle frequency,
or mid frequencies, I would say, right? So those are part of texture as well. So if we take those out, then the face will still, when we zoom out after we've retouched and applied the frequency separation, it will still look flat and mannequin-like, because it's not just the texture, like this texture that we will take onto the high frequency layer, but also what's underneath it, but before it goes into like the broad white tones, right?
And so we see that a lot, like when a lot of especially newer retouchers, but some people just endlessly take it way too far. I mean, I know a lot of your work has this beautiful natural feel to it. You could just touch the skin, and Michael's does too. Michael Velosnovich, whom is also part of Retouching Academy, he's also exceptional at maintaining that beautiful natural look to the skin. What I was going to mention just before you do the frequency, and I really want to get to that, is that one thing I just did, I have a couple different actions. One of them is yours for frequency separation that I got from the first book in Tools, but I kind of wrote mine, and I always put a stop in it when it gets to the blur part.
Right.
So because every image is different, or even different parts of the image are different.
Right.
And so you can't just run a one-size-fits-all action.
Yes.
You really need to stop it at that blur, and give it the right radius.
Right. That's absolutely what it is, and that's how it should be. I just started that action, the type of action that you're talking about. We've got it in this panel. We've finished the panel. We're just about to release it, and we've actually created a new one which is free. This will go hand in hand with the main one. This is all the just in buttons, the things that are not easily pulled out from the menu or hotkeys, and this is our main one, and we've got those actions that don't have a stop, and they kind of generally do a pretty good setup for full body shots of frequency separation, and for a portrait with a little bit more blurring because the face will be closer to the camera. And then there is custom, which is what I usually use. So I'm gonna just delete that again. Do you want me to show the steps as they are manually, or it doesn't need to be shown anymore because everyone knows how it's set up?
Oh, it'd probably be a good idea to walk through it manually, then just an area to demonstrate before we're going to have to kind of wrap it up. But I do want you to show it manually what that action is doing in the background.
Okay.
Because it's not all that complicated once you've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I normally, if I was to set it up manually, there are two ways the frequency separation. You can get the same results, just two different kind of approaches. I prefer the high pass, and you will see why. But there is also, you can do frequency separation through apply image, and I'm going to show the one that I mainly use.
Okay.
There are some good uses that I use the apply image one, but I mainly use the high pass one because it allows me to actually see how much texture I'm taking up to the top high frequency layer. So I would do a couple of, that was the layer with my most recent changes. So I will duplicate it twice, and this will be my high frequency layer, and this will be my low frequency layer. Oh, it's been so long since I had to do it manually. Oh, I still remember.
Putting you right on the spot.
So through filter, other, and high pass, on the high frequency layer, which is where our texture will be sitting, so we can work underneath it and even out the tones so that we don't mess up the texture. So here, what we need to, the radius that we need to select, I'm actually going up and down through, every picture is different, so you will always have absolutely different numbers here. So with this one, this number would be not enough. If I'm working on this cheek, there are some lines that look like little scars or reddish scars. If I was to take them out, I need to see the texture. And now I'm not seeing the texture in the area that I'm aiming to work on. So I'll just pull it up higher. And now I'm starting to see that texture. So here, depending on what my goal is, if I want to just even out the undertone, that I will just take just enough texture, not so much, just enough so that I've got a little bit of skin texture on this layer, and then I can, underneath it, I can take out those, depending on the size of those patches that I want to take out. So let's just play and see the difference. So if I go and do 4, for example, I'm seeing the texture now, so that should be fine. And then exactly the same, okay, I'll set it up completely, so it will be linear light. And also here, I need to apply adjustment, brightness. I'm not going to explain all of this because, again, that's all already is in the guide there. And then I will go here and apply Gaussian blur, just exactly the same number that I've just applied with, it was 4, so I'm going to do 4. And then the high frequency is set to linear light. There was a correction that was made through adjustments, brightness and contrast, use legacy, and -50 in contrast. It's always -50. There are no variations. And so now these 2 layers, and I always group them. See, I turn them on and off, nothing is changing. But within them, if I turn this one off, then now I'm seeing only the tones, and now I'm only seeing the texture. So I have separated my image into one layer that contains all the texture, and the other layer that has the underlying tones. This way, if I add a layer in between them and start working on this layer, and this is very important, I do insist that everyone works on the layer in between, never on this actual layer. I used to work on this, but there are limitations as to how you can then fine-tune your, what you've done. With this layer, if you overdo something, I can use the, I will use the healing brush, and when I'm working here, all I need to make sure of, my healing brush doesn't sample from all layers, because I don't want to take anything that sits up there. That's the whole point. So I need to make sure that I'm on current and below. I can't use current because there is nothing on the layer, so I won't be sampling anything. Yeah, and I can't use all layers as well, because then I will be actually taking into account what's sitting above, and that defeats the purpose of the whole thing, right? So current and below, and since I'm working on the tones, I want to make sure that my healing brush hardness is way softer. It doesn't need to be 0, but I usually keep it at that, so it's really, really soft. And then I'm going to just try and get out this part, right? Those little patches that are kind of mixing up the skin tone right here. So I'm going to just work around. And you can see that some things are disappearing, but some don't, which means, like this part, this means that I've actually gone a little bit too far, and I've taken that texture onto the high frequency layer. So now it sits above it. See? Now I've evened it out, but it's actually on this layer. So if I wanted to take that out, I should have gone a little bit lower with the pixels. And this is something that you kind of, you start, oops, because I'm standing on the high frequency. This is something that you kind of, but through trial and error, you kind of start seeing that when enough is enough, when you need to see this much texture, when you need to see that much texture to get rid of something. So I was trying to get this patches out here. That was my task. So I went a little bit higher in, I had just a little bit of texture taken out with the radius that I selected. If I was to, for example, completely, for example, fix this texture problem here, right? Let's see, I will, this time I won't do it manually, I will just run my custom action, which again, it does the same thing, it just asks me, and it stops at the points where I have to select the radius and asks me how much texture I want. So I'll go higher. I now want that whole texture to be taken up to this texture layer. So I'm going to take a lot more than I wanted before. So I can fix it on the texture layer and have that even skin tone underneath. So I can actually replace it on the texture layer and not have to deal with 2 layers. Does that make sense? I want the whole problem to be taken up to the texture layer, because I will be able to take a piece of good texture and cover it up there. Yeah. And my underlying layer will be blurred so much that it won't have that kind of after color there. Okay, let's.
Like that's a learning. That's kind of a learning. This is why you have to do this. You have to invest some time doing it, because I mean, you would understand by looking at the image intuitively now, after spending thousands of hours, doing this, that how much of that you would need to have on the higher layer and what you would want to deal with on the lower layer.
I would still mistake every once in a while, but it's easy. I just delete it and redo it again. But yeah. The thing is, the understanding of this technique, I think, is what depending on what you're trying to correct, because it's not even just knowing how much texture you need to. It's how much texture in what situation. If I'm trying to fix this texture right here, let's see. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe maybe it wasn't still the correct radius that I selected. But when I show you the whole thing, then it will probably make more sense why I selected the higher radius that I selected. So I often turn off that layer so I can actually see what was left there. And so now I'm seeing that there is still this a little bit of a problem here. I'm going to go to my underlying layer because I still see that blurred kind of the after color of that pimple still there. So I'm going to just even it out just a little bit. I use just a normal brush as well very often, just paint over. Yeah. And this is a visible kind of, drop in values, which is what suggests uneven texture. And these kind of things also can be, sometimes I would say don't go that far, or don't do this changing the actual light distribution is dangerous. So if you're not sure whether or not it's appropriate to take out some shadows, then you better not do that.
Yeah.
But I can see that this part, the shadow should be evenly kind of spread all over the chin, right? It should be some sort of a line, and it's not because it's broken up with different values here. So that's why I'm kind of trying to even out that area. And once we do that, it's still a little bit patchy. I would definitely use just a brush. It's easier here. And then let's get back. That is gone. And then while I'm here, I can either use the clone stamp tool, but here I have to definitely make sure that my clone stamp is set to current layer, because I don't want, while I'm working on the high frequency layer, I don't want anything else to be taken into consideration because everything else is underneath. So those two are not going to work. If you accidentally have any of those and you try to do anything on the high frequency, that's what you will get, because it sits on the linear light. It's on the linear light blending mode. So we definitely need to, if that happens, you just on the wrong sampling. So I will go back here. There are a few ways to tackle this type of problem with the texture here. I can just make sure that my my clone stamp tool is on. No, that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for hardness. I just want to make sure that my clone stamp tool is a hard brush with a harder opacity, and then I could just select from a good texture here and just cover it up. Oh, make sure that that opacity is right here. And then just cover it up. And sampling from the correct texture is very, very important here. And I can cover this up here. And I can cover these things.
I was just going to say, obviously when you're retouching for fashion and beauty, and for cosmetics and for different things, you're going to be more aggressive or have a different outcome in mind than if you were retouching for a portrait session or for kids or for, I mean, there's a certain amount of restraint you need to exercise depending on what it is you're retouching for. I think everybody's going to nod their head that yes, 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 that has to happen, but we still see just overdone, overdone all the time.
I think there is also a very good article from my friend from Australia, Brock. He's a fashion photographer in Brisbane. It's so awesome. I've been communicating with a lot of people all around the world, you know, through Retouching Academy. And as I travel a lot now teaching, also I get invited. So of course I say yes to that. And and I meet a lot of people that I have already, I've already known them through, and I've communicated with them so much through the Retouching Academy, Facebook, or whatever, and then I meet them in person. It's just such a wonderful experience. And I just met Brock. Brock has written this article that is called Retouching Guidelines and Consideration. It's also on Retouching Academy, on the Retouching Academy blog, and I can as well share the link to it later. But it does talk about how much retouching is expected when you're retouching a portrait, when you're retouching a commercial beauty image or fashion image, or just different types of photography, how much retouching is expected and how much retouching is appropriate to apply. And it's always different, of course, especially with private photography. We're all photographers here. And we understand that often we don't charge for retouching services separately. So the faster we do it, the better. And we also need to understand that, to me, my private clients come to me for that magazine-looking kind of retouch or painterly kind of look, which is what I was going for initially when I got into retouching. Sort of a illustration, photograph, digital painting type. That's what I used to do a lot, and now I'm trying to get into more natural look. I've been doing that for a while now, but my clients come to me for that, for a lot of retouching. But if you're, just a local photographer and your clients are not really into that whole magazine-looking photography, then really a lot of retouching isn't needed. And the frequency separation and the dodge and burn can be used so quickly when you know what you're going for. Like really just a couple of clicks and here and there, then you just zoom out and look at the overall image, how it looks. Do the problems that we're looking at, are they visible when they print them out? They won't be visible, and they won't be inspecting the image this close. So you don't need to be retouching this close. You need to be retouching. You need to zoom out and look at the problems, find the problems when you're looking at them. This is probably the biggest that they're going to print it. So look at it. Okay, so am I seeing any problems? Okay, I'm seeing this problem. Then I will zoom in, take care of this problem, zoom out, and see, what's the next problem. I'm seeing this shadow. Okay, I will zoom in here, and I will take care of that shadow, and so on. So what a lot of people do is just zoom in, and I've done that. I'm not, and I've learned the hard way. I would zoom in this close and retouch and retouch and retouch and retouch and retouch. Yeah, and then, oh my God, why did I do that? It did not change anything because it wasn't visible in the first place. It was too close. And also, you're risking to actually take away those midtones and that mid texture. Those tiny little differences in values and highlights, that is also texture. It's not the text, not the hard texture that we're usually taking to the high frequency layer, but it's also texture, because if you even out that completely, the skin will look not natural. It will lose all the realism there is, and so it's very important to not just apply the technique, but actually understand how much you can take out and what to take out, and when you know what you need to take out, then you know how much you need to take onto the high frequency layer and what you need to leave underneath. So, with those things, the reason why I said you always need to be working on the layer in between, if at some point, if you see that something is like, for example, I've taken out a little bit more than I should have, I've evened out that tone a little bit too much, I can always just take the opacity down, and which is I always do. I take the opacity down, I take the intensity of what I've just done back down, and that's how, step by step, you're not losing those mid-tones and mid-textures. And, for example, if I was to take care of, this is bugging me, I'm seeing this little area, and it's just that just makes me crazy. You probably need to have, you have to be OCD also to be able to.
Probably you have to be OCD, and then you need somebody behind you controlling your OCD.
Right, stopping you when it's time to move on. Well, with this, since I've already lowered the opacity, I'm not going to mess around with this layer. I will just add another one, and I will tackle the other task with now I'm trying to do something. Oh, here, I'm on the current layer. So if I'm trying to even out this tones and oops, nothing is happening, or I'm still seeing a lot of differences. Oh, of course, that's another problem. When I'm talking, I'm not looking at the tools I'm using. That was the clone stamp tool. That's why I love the healing brush. Okay, it's empty. So with the healing brush tool, I can actually a little bit easier even this out. But nothing is really happening. I still see the differences, and it's because, again, a lot of it is taken. See how much blurring there is. So I'm not going to be able to fix that because I've
be on your high frequency there.
Yeah. So another way what I can do here to fix that, and it's not really, I wouldn't spend that much time in reality. I'm just showing, the approach, but in reality, I would just take care of it in the second with even just dodging and burning would help that. But I just want to show the other way of fixing the frequency on the frequency on the high frequency layer. So if I've got something that sits on the high frequency layer and I need to get rid of it, and obviously fixing the lower frequency isn't going to help, what I can do is I will sample this neighboring texture and duplicate it by pressing Command J. Yeah. Then I need to go back to normal and clip it as a clipping mask to that high frequency layer. And then with the move tool, I can just move that texture on top of whatever problem I've got. This is perfect for when you're lacking texture, and then you can always just mask the, whatever you don't need.
Yeah, because I'm sure anybody that's done very much retouching, there comes a point when you just start losing texture, and you do need to get some natural texture back in.
Yeah, you can always just borrow it from a different area. Just watch for not creating a pattern, because patterns are, I'm now seeing, and I will show it. This would be, I would have to redo this if I was really to retouch this image. I wouldn't allow, it's not very visible, but if you can see, I've just sampled from here, and I've got exactly the same pattern. So this is something to watch out for, to not, make sure to not repeat any texture patterns. It's not going to be visible in this case, but normally I would have tried to avoid that type of problem. And yeah, and so on. So basically, you're clipping the texture to the high frequency layer, and then you can, whenever you lack in texture, if you've got someone who's got a lot of problems in the skin and you need to make them look better because they're paying you for that, maybe they came to you so you can fix their, you know, acne or whatever skin problems. And after retouching and taking a lot of, you know, you will retouch the texture, the underlying tone, you will retouch this and that, you will end up losing texture in some places. Yeah. So this approach would be perfect for whenever you need to, you know, borrow some texture from one area to another. And overall, like when there are larger areas that's just the difference in values and tones, right? This patch of brighter. For that, I would just run another frequency separation round, and I would just take just a little bit of texture up onto that higher layer, probably just about 3 maybe, and I will show you why. And then 3 for the blurring as well. And then what I usually do, I just turn off the texture layer, and either with the healing brush or with just a simple brush, I would sample from the area, from the neighboring area that I want to even this area out with, and on the very low opacity. And I'm not very concerned. If I'm a little bit higher opacity than I should, I can always lower the opacity of the layer because I can. So I would just brush over, and this is definitely a very high opacity. I'm going to go down. Come on. It's about there. And I will just brush over this just to even this things out. And just here. I'm working with it a lot faster these days, and I'm not scared to apply a little bit more than I need, because I can always just take it back until I hit the correct amount of that change. And this is obviously just very rough and very clumsy work.
And so just to kind of wrap up the idea of frequency separation in skin retouching, because it's a very powerful technique. And it can take hours, or it can take minutes, or even seconds on some retouches, depending on what your outcome is. But what essentially you're doing is there's no blurring of the skin texture.
No.
The blurring that occurs is in the tonal values under the texture.
Yes.
And so rather than just taking a Gaussian blur on the whole face and then doing some kind of blur technique, you're maintaining the natural look of the texture of the skin while smoothing out some of the imperfections.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And also there are, the implementations are almost endless. With a lot of problems that we usually deal with, the hair that sticks out, and you know, the baby hair, she doesn't have that much, but sometimes we have a lot of hair kind of coming out here, and you know, the hair casts shadow, so there is, even if you take out with a clone stamp tool, you start taking that out, and then it just becomes a big mess. What you can do is take more texture with a higher pixel radius onto the high frequency layer, so you actually keep all the hair strands on that layer.
Yeah.
And then you can go under and even out that shadow that the hair casts, and even it out with the color of the skin, and then you can even leave it at that. Just make sure that it looks organic and looks, you know, it in harmony with the rest of the hairline, and then there you go. You may have the hairs sitting on that high frequency layer, but they won't bother anyone because they're, you know, just far away. For example, here I could just go ahead and just darken this area just a little bit, the hair is there. I'm working under the hair texture, so I can, if you know, it takes time and precision. Of course, I wouldn't be just as sloppy when I actually work. I would even out the colors, but that's kind of, you know, with depending what you're looking for. If you need to preserve the texture, very harsh texture on the top for a few different reasons, because you want to even out the tones underneath it, then you go higher in your radius.
You just increase your radius on your,
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, when you want to just even out the smaller problems like what we had here and still keep the texture, then you take just a little bit of texture, so that will allow you to actually affect those tiny, you know, mid frequencies.
Yeah.
So, and then it becomes really your second nature. Well, I haven't done much with the picture, and it's not, you know, the time won't allow us to actually do much, but you can, you know.
Yeah, just a few things that you did, it's clear that it's very natural look to it.
Yeah, the change, and of course it's, you know, the more natural the picture should be, the more time sometimes it takes to achieve it. But at the same time, if I was to just quickly just pretty this up, I would just, you know, get rid of, I will just paint on these things, okay? Because this is something that everyone needs to understand, what needs to be taken out for, you know, what you need to actually, you know, implement that technique too. What I would brighten this just tiny little bit, just a little bit. I would definitely even out these areas with the frequency separation or dodging and burning. I would even out this outline a little bit, probably even using the a little bit of liquefying by pushing this, or I would take more texture up onto the high frequency layer, and then underneath it I would darken it a little bit, but making sure that this, you know, the color of these shadows are similar to these shadows. So I wouldn't make it less saturated or darker. I would definitely make sure that everything is kind of in the same, you know, the same amount, the same value, the same saturation. And then I would definitely, this is my pet peeve, I just hate the nasolabial folds. I do believe they make every face look older and tired and everything, but she's smiling here, so we can't completely take it out. We can't take it out. So what I would do, I would just simply just lighten this area just a little bit.
Yeah.
And brighten, and darken this area just a little bit to bring the values closer to one another, and that could be done with dodging and burning easily, but it can also be done with the frequency separation. I could just take, say, radius 3 for this picture, or maybe, 3, 4, so I actually have that amount of texture that we had here, and then I would just, you know, paint with sampling from the neighboring colors. I would just paint under to even this out, and then it won't be as prominent. It won't be like this big fall from, you know, the cheek catching on the light, and then there is this big shadow that cheek is casting. Yeah. And then there is this highlight again.
And that goes back to us talking about understanding how form works and light falls on the face too.
Yes.
I'm going to have to wrap things up really soon, Julia, but I wanted you to, because I see this fantastic panel here, you really haven't addressed it, but I know that you've been working on this panel, and just before we close things up, do you want to let us know, you said you have a free one and a paid one, how are those going to be available to us?
We are just about to finish them up. The panel is actually, well, we made it in Flash, which is what was until CC.
Yes,
and then once we were ready to release it, Adobe said no, HTML5. So we had to, my developers had to, and they're in Russia, and it's really difficult to find the, you know, in forums and everything, to find the new, to learn the new, you know, how to redo it in HTML5. So now we actually wrapped it up. They've learned everything they needed, so now it's HTML5. So recreated completely. So what it does, basically, the top is just easily to, you know, create new layers, just new layer, then duplicate layer, sharpen the image, sharpen details, which is just by sharpen image, it just stamps all your layers and then adds a very sharp layer, which you then just change the opacity. Obviously, it will be different for every image, and then you will merge it down when you find the amount of sharpening that you want to apply. And here's your sharpened image, and then you move on. Or sharpen details, which is same thing, only with a mask, and so you only unsharpen details. It calls for the tools that we normally use. Liquify filter works super fast. It wasn't as fast right now because my RAM is probably taken away with Hangouts and everything. There
was a huge improvement between CS5 and CS6, and then again in CC. They really improved the speed of that.
Yeah. But even when I go into filter and liquify here, it still takes a couple of seconds. In the panels, I don't know how it works, but it calls in like right then. Works really fast. I don't know how. And then transform tool. Then we've got dodge and burn already set up right here. Just click, and we've got. I'm actually writing the user manual where I in steps explain every of this.
Oh, good.
Buttons. So it will explain how to actually use this when you're dodging and burning. And this is just a visual aid. Once you're done dodging and burning, you just delete it and move on. And that's based on curves. And then the other one is based on mid-gray layer. Then we've got our frequency separation that you've seen me use, and then frequency separation for 8 and 16-bit apply image. And then digital skin texture, that's for when we lost a lot of texture. We could do what I was talking about, just borrow the texture through the high frequency layer. But there is also a little trick that I've learned a long time ago, and I've been using it quite successfully. It creates a certain type of grain, like this, and then it covers it with a mask, and all you need to do is just uncover the mask, say somewhere where we would have very little texture. We haven't lost any texture, so it's difficult.
She's got perfect texture.
Let's see, maybe, okay, well, hopefully I can show it here, and then I will uncover just where I need it, and then sometimes that grain, you can see that grain, and of course I would make a better selection. I'm just
just for demonstration.
Yeah. So if it's a little bit too small, comparing to the size of the grain or to the texture in the rest of the image, I unlink the mask and the actual layer, and then I would just call for free transform tool and enlarge this layer, which will enlarge the size of the texture.
The texture only, yeah. Huh, good
and then I will just click yes, accept, and then my texture will be larger. And if it's too grainy, then I will just take the opacity down.
Yeah.
This works perfect for when you've, I know exactly where that would be in this image where I would use it. After dodging and burning this, if I was to bring this, make this brighter, I would most likely lose a lot of texture in the shadow here.
Yeah.
I would definitely use this. I would just add that tiny little grain here, enlarge it to the point that it matches to the rest of the texture in the image. And yeah, so this is very helpful. I love it. And then Connie, our team member from Retouching Academy, he used to be a programmer. Now he's a photographer and retoucher. So he's got the best of out of the world.
What a great set of gifts to have.
Yeah.
Get them both.
So he created this amazing magic skin tone script. Basically what it does, it calculates if you've got somewhere in the image, you've got some tones are completely off or very desaturated, and you want to even out. You know what? When you have a full body shot, the legs are always a completely different color than.
Yeah. I had a student with that today.
Yeah, and sometimes the face is a completely different color than the shoulders and the arms and 10 lines and all of that. So what you can do with this, you can select a few. Okay, you need to select the shadow color, the highlight color, and the mid-tone color. Well, I'm kind of not doing a good job of selecting right now, but just again for demonstration purposes. And then you just cover everything, and then you uncover just the areas where you needed to add. For example, I wanted to get rid of that yellow
Yeah, it would bring back the matched color cast.
Yeah, and then I would definitely take it back down to almost 10, 12% or 20%, and then I would just match the opacity of the layer to make sure that the skin tone looks very, I unify it with this tool. But there are some, whenever I use this, I have to be really, really cautious and not get out of the, of the skin, because if I do, then I will have that spill.
It affects the background.
Because it's not like selective color when you're only affecting the red, so you don't have to worry about the rest of the image because there is no red in the background. With this one, it's actually a gradient map, so that will spill. And
it affects everything. Yeah.
Funny enough.
So you were saying this is about to be, like, you're just about ready to release it to the
Yes.
public, and we could find that
This
those
week.
who are members of the Retouching Academy would be able to get it there, and then I guess you'll probably announce that on Fstoppers too. I would
Oh
think.
yeah, we will. Yes, it will be on the Retouching Academy and on my personal page, and we will definitely release them both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I would suggest if anyone considers, purchasing this in the future, I would suggest to just download this and then see how it gets installed, because we ran it and tested it across all platforms and on so many computers, but still, sometimes someone just can't install it or something, so there's no way for us to actually... Oh, see? In 30 minutes, I've got an event with you.
Yeah, I don't know how that got messed up. But
I don't know. But I'm going to see you in half an hour. So just to test and see, but then whoever purchases this one, that one will come along as well. I am so used to, I've been testing it for so long, fixing all the bugs with my developer, going back and forth. I'm so used to it that I don't even go, I don't have to go to this side of the screen anymore, because I've got all my tools here. I've got all my techniques that I run all the time. I've got glowing skin, anti-pink, magic eyes, magic smile, which is the actions that I created even in my book.
I got to tell you, that magic eyes, oh my goodness. I use that all the time.
I know. It's now
fantastic.
I'm so fluent with this that it takes me 10 seconds to retouch the eyes. And I'm just so happy that I started trying to, I've created it many years ago now. I'm just going to show just the very, very quickly so we don't spend too much time. This is what it does. It just removes. I used to use a healing brush to go in, zoom in.
I know, so did I, until I got that. And what it does, it doesn't, in the whole thing, you really, you kind of build in a bit of restraint, so it doesn't overdo things. If you're careful with it, you'd have to almost duplicate and do it again to overdo it.
Yeah.
As far as the brightening and.
Yeah, well, it's easy to overdo, and sometimes this happens, and then that's just dodging and burning thing. But definitely so much faster, and I take it back down a little bit, so it's not a big deal when there is just a little bit. I mainly use this part for just remove the redness, and because there is the opacity, which a lot of people underestimate. The opacity is your best friend if you're just beginning, retouching, especially working with faces, and not always knowing what looks good. But I still don't know, not always know how it should look. So I take it a little bit further, and then I always take my opacity back down, sometimes to 50% or even further down.
Yeah.
So that's the best approach.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get you to stop screen sharing now and bring you back, because we're gonna have to cut it short. We've gone a bit over time, but I think it was well worth it to see how that whole process works and to understand when you use frequency separation, why you use it, and exactly what it's doing, because it's not just a tool and you just don't go crazy. And I think one of the big things that people do is it's like that OCD thing. You blow it up and you're looking at it so closely you forget to back off, and you just invest a lot of time in doing something nobody's ever going to see, or you take away all the form and it has that mannequin look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are exactly the mistakes. Keep an eye out for my next Fstoppers post, which I hope probably next week. My retouching panel is number one. I have to finish the user manual, but then I've already selected all the comments that I've collected in the Retouching Academy, all the do's and don'ts when it comes to the frequency separation technique. What actually people do to ruin their image with that technique. So I've collected. It's going to be a long article, and it's mainly just all our members saying this is what I've noticed people do to ruin images. So, you know, I think it will be really, really helpful to actually look through and see, okay, oh yeah, I've been doing this, so I should probably pull back and not do this because it's considered a mistake by the people who've actually mastered it.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us and walking us through that, letting us know that panel's about to become available, because that's really going to help a lot of people out in doing their retouching and taking away those manual steps and speeding things up. That's awesome. I can't wait. I'll be getting mine right away.
all I can say is awesome. And
yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah, so I really enjoy learning from you. I know you teach all over the world now, and you're running workshops, and that's something that would, if anybody's able to get into one of your workshops, it's would be definitely change their work forever.
Yeah, I just got my the UK visa today.
Yeah, I saw that post. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I'm still amazed that someone wants to learn from me because I'm always learning myself.
Well, I think that's the great thing about a teacher is teachers are always learning themselves, and they never stop. Hilmar, I'd like to thank you for joining us too, and I kind of cut you off there, but I just want to reiterate that really love seeing you grow. Really love the fact that Scott featured you on his blog, and to go check out Scott Kelby's blog and Hilmar's work. She is the next up and coming photographer retoucher on the block. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It was nice to meet you all, guys and ladies.
And,
I'll see you soon.
Yeah, don't leave right away. I'm just going to hit stop broadcast. So thanks, everyone, and I'll talk to you in a sec.